do.
So, Jacqui, tell me your name and tell me why you're here.
Okay, I'm Jacqui Taylor and I'm CEO of Flying Binary, and I'm a web scientist, and I'm curating the data halo for NHS Citizen.
So you were earlier telling me about some of the things that happened yesterday, and I just wanted to find out more about that, find out some of the conversations you had and some of the things that maybe have changed in your mind.
You never quite know what to expect with an NHS Citizen anything, because it's the unexpected that is the magic. And I think yesterday we were all prepared for everything, but then what happened wasn't again what we expected. Why was that? People started to understand their role in NHS Citizen, and one of the ways they did that in the work that I'm involved in was we told some stories yesterday, data from the NHS, data that people had never seen before, and they made the connection to their part in NHS Citizen as a result of that. So a couple of stories. One of them was an illustration we did about asking citizens in the education policy arena how they would change education policy for the benefit of all. Now, I haven't got that story yet for the NHS, but that actually triggered a whole series of pop-up workshops to explore that. And we now think we have a means of tackling what we call the invisible patient problem. People that only arrive in the NHS service at the most acute areas of care, and they're not part of the system before that. And we got very excited by how that might be. We've got a proposal on the table, red flag to raise and gather, and we're good to go. Wouldn't have expected to get anything quite so fundamental to happen quite so quickly. The second one was a social care story that we told. What we understood from that, we got advocacy groups in the room, and they're very key to NHS Citizen, because it's the hard to reach groups that actually have the most to gain and the most understanding we need. If we can get the advocates to understand how that connects, and that social care story did that for people that represent people with physical disabilities and mental health issues, but interestingly at a local or in part of the conversation a hyper-local level. So that makes it takes NHS Citizen down to the service provision in an actual area with a real community being supported. So that social care story immediately starts to build the evidence for how transformative changes to social care can be in a community. If we can make that happen in one community, which was Avon and Bristol we were talking about yesterday, that's a model that we can replicate. Very exciting.
So tell me about that social care story. Is this a story you're telling with data?
Yes, so we actually use the open data that is released by the Health and Social Care Information Centre, who do great work with open data. I'm an open data specialist, and I work in Cabinet Office looking at how we can enable people with open data. So we just took the social care data that the HSCIC release, and we told that story, which is usually given to people in tabular form with a bunch of numbers, and we actually told them the story of that data and what's in there. But because we can do that to an individual local authority, we can look at daycare provision, home care provision. The advocates that were in the room that were looking after people with physical disabilities and mental health issues actually could relate that to their own work. So I had people saying, here's my card, in lieu of my data, we want to connect the stories together. So that's data stories having a conversation about data. So I'm off to talk to the NHS Citizen team about having that facility up on the NHS Citizen system, so people can tell us about that, whether they happen to be in Bristol for the event or not.
So I'm guessing one of the powers of an event like this is that you get to connect data sets, if I can put it like that. So you can put different stories together and find new truths. Is that a good
Not
way of putting it?
Not really. So connecting data sets has lots of unhelpful connotations. So it's not about connecting the data, it's telling the story in the data that actually has a human component. And then people who are already working in that arena, that's the power of NHS Citizen. We can connect those people who are delivering huge value across the service but are not able to influence any change to that service. So we can, if we tell the story of NHS social care, as we did yesterday, they can say at a community level for people with physical disabilities, here's their story, and that doesn't match So why is there a disconnect between the national picture and the local picture for Avon and Bristol? And because they have data and we've created a data story, we can make a story out of their data and say to NHS England, these two agendas don't match. And that's why at a local level people are unhappy with the provision, because actually you're telling a national picture that isn't representative in some areas.
I appreciate it's probably difficult to do this without visual aids, but
Yes.
tell me more about a data story and what components there are in it and how it kind of fits together, because I'm guessing I'm kind of looking upwards at the monitor, which you can't see on the camera obviously, but I'm guessing it's pictures showing data and therefore sort of, I don't know, indicating where patterns are and things like that for people who maybe haven't been introduced to this stuff before.
Yeah.
Could you explain how that works?
Yeah, so I'm a data journalist and I'm credited with co-founding the industry, and the reason for that is we've understood as web scientists we deal with 120 languages every day as we roll out the World Wide Web across the world, and we localise, we work definitively in 16 languages. Now as we connect the next 60% of humanity and almost another 6 billion people, language can't be used. We can't use language. It's going to be too difficult. Nobody will speak that language. So we've been speaking the language of data for the last 3 years, and our largest audience is 34 million strong, where you tell a story with data, actual evidence, and you tell it in a visual way. So it doesn't matter what actual language you speak, if you can learn how their stories are, what they mean to you. So as data journalists, we tell the story of social care, and that's our view of it. But the very next thing that happens is an advocate comes into this room, grabs an iPad and starts interacting with our story and tells the story of Avon and Bristol. So it's not really about what we do. We just start the conversation with data. But because data is a universal language, because it's pictures, you know, the old adage of a picture paints 1,000 words, where it might take me 10 minutes to have this interview, I can actually within 2 minutes engage with an advocate who's working in mental health issues in Herefordshire, because actually I can show him Herefordshire, where it is in the national picture, and he can say, you haven't got all the data, I've got more data you can tell a story with. So if we get to a place where as data journalists and data scientists we tell those stories on behalf of NHS Citizen, then we get what we had today in this room, which is, get what we had yesterday in this room, which is people saying, I have something to add to that story. So I've got extra evidence that you can blend in, and your story becomes richer. It becomes local. It becomes something that the NHS can actually change in the way it delivers a service. So that CCG can actually say, but for Avon and Bristol, we see the data story now. We can change that.
Brilliant, I think that's great. One last question. If people want to find out a bit more about the stuff that you do, where can they look? Where's a good place for them to go and have a look?
Right, okay. Our website is a very overarching one because our work is very wide. We're working with the NHS Citizen team to pull things together that encapsulate it for NHS Citizen. And I think what we will do from this event is work out how we can share more of that for the people that weren't here or the people that want to get started on understanding that data journey. So I'm going to work with the website, the NHS Citizen website team, to say how can we broaden that so it's more accessible to people who didn't have me explaining it and weren't able to dialogue with their own area of NHS work. So NHS Citizen is going to be the place. Obviously have a look at the Flying Boundary website, there's all sorts of things in there, but there's also a contact button. If you need to talk to us, just press it and say hello.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Okay.